Welcome everyone to the first ever Moo Moo Awards Mini, a spin-off of the main Moo Moo Awards at the end of each year. The mini-series will focus on individual series, rather than an overarching year's worth of content, and many will be ranking lists rather than reading off one winner. For this first one, we are ranking the Marvel Cinematic Universe's Infinity Saga. Our 6 wonderful panel of judges have all ranked the 23 films in this series, and, using my math system, I have determined the most objectively correct ordering of these films of all time. It's science, so it can't be disputed. Each judge's number 1 film was given 23 points, the number 2 22, etc., until we listed them all. At the bottom of the screen, after each movie reveal, I will show you each judge's respective scoring out of the 23 possible points, so you know exactly who to blame if a movie got lower or higher than you think it deserved. I'm never to blame though, so don't even try. Let's get into it now, starting with the worst film in the Infinity Saga and working our way up. In last place we have Thor: The Dark World, and yeah, this movie belongs here. Almost every aspect of this film is incredibly bare bones, from the love chemistry between Thor and Jane to the fight sequences. Jane and Thor have like no chemistry in this film, somehow removing the few bits they did have in Thor 2011. The side human characters in their attempt at comedy also range from cringe to not funny. I can barely even remember any of the fights in this movie, and the main villain might be the most forgettable and awful in the franchise. We went from a pretty three-dimensional villain with Loki to this awful nothing character. Actually, I can barely even remember really anything that happened in this film because it was so uninteresting and dull. And this was the first MCU film I watched in theaters, and that's incredibly disappointing. That experience should be memorable for a young kid watching a superhero film, but it wasn't. The only real praise I can give it is Loki, who is performed wonderfully by Tom Hiddleston, and who has the start of his redemption arc, which is one of my favorite character arcs in the MCU, if not my favorite. It's not enough though to keep this film from ranking last. Captain Marvel is another bland movie that had the unfortunate task of coming out between 2 Avengers films. The audience was expecting big, good movies to match Infinity War, and this, and the other in-between film we'll get to soon, did not deliver. Message-wise, it's one of those movies that plainly explains why fascism is bad, while simultaneously practically being an ad for the US military, which is in itself fascist. This incoherent messaging reflects the incoherent plot that doesn't seem to know what it wants to do until the very end. People like to blame Brie Larson and wokeness for killing Marvel or whatever, but she's perfectly fine here, as is the rest of the cast like Samuel L. Jackson. The writing and plot, which isn't woke at all, is almost purely the issue with this film, not the fact that it has a woman lead. Anyway, it's 22nd in the ranking. Moving on. Hawk's only solo film in the MCU, and it's sadly awful. This character has so much potential for interesting stories and emotional themes, but he hasn't been given that chance really since this film, and this film chooses not to do that, instead delivering a fairly uninteresting action movie. It follows Iron Man's example of having a big bad with the same powers, which is a very boring superhero trope unless done properly, which of course this film doesn't do. Edward Norton, while an excellent actor, doesn't really work here as Bruce Banner. He just doesn't give off the right mannerisms needed for the role. And Mark Ruffalo would have been interesting to see here because it might have improved the film a bit. Hulk and Bruce Banner can be such an interesting character dynamic, but it seems they can only be interesting in team-up films like the Avengers 1 and 2. Yes, he deserves another solo film, but I'm going to need it to be more memorable and impactful than this film, which is ranking towards the bottom of this list. Ant-Man and the Wasp takes the already mediocre original and makes an even worse film. The first Ant-Man at least had some interesting fight sequences with the character's shrinking effect, but this one fails even in that regard. The shrinking and cool fight sequences seem to come second to, well, nothing, because the story, dialogue, and jokes are all equally lame. It is cool to see the aftermath of Civil War actually explored, since Infinity War kind of just brushes past it quickly. But that aspect just leads to a boring subplot where Scott Lang has to be careful not to be seen by an incredibly unfunny and boring Jimmy Woo. Oh yeah, Ghost is the villain and she's pretty boring and strange. You're supposed to feel sympathy for her, I think, but they just make her an asshole at every step. Her problem is also just immediately solved by Janet at the end of the film, making this entire conflict so fucking stupid and pointless, which is the best way to describe this film as a whole. Even Paul Rudd's charisma isn't enough to make me care about his character or this movie, and the judges seem to agree. Thor is already returning for another spot in the bottom 5. While not good, this movie is infinitely better than Thor the Dark World. The fish out of water plot isn't the worst here, and taking essentially a Lord of the Rings character and placing him in some random place in the middle of a small town in New Mexico leads to a few funny and interesting moments. This one's kinda hard to have much to say, because for me it's kinda just the middle of the road for the MCU. Oh, Loki's great here, as I mentioned before, as is Chris Hemsworth and most of the supporting cast. Stan Lee's cameo is one of the funnier ones in the MCU. The Destroyer is interesting and menacing enough to be scary for a small town, I guess. I unlocked it in LEGO Avengers and had to look up who the heck he is. You have gone off topic. Focus. Yeah, okay, we need to move on. This movie is whatever. I really don't know what else to say. And we're back with Ant-Man, who seems to have failed in getting a solo movie that is more than just mediocre. The first Ant-Man is definitely a vast improvement over the second one. As I mentioned before, the use of the shrinking effect for fights is very well done here. I think most of these fight sequences are the highlight of this film. Everything else, however, is just eh. It's not bad, but it's really hard to care about any of it because the film is just missing that extra something to make it unique and good. Paul Rudd is okay, as are the other actors, but that's all they are. None of them stand out or feel like perfect fits like some of the other MCU casting choices. I do like Falcon showing up here because it really helps this film to feel connected to the rest of the universe. I always like it when superhero movies have these small little cameos because it just makes the world feel all intertwined and reminds us we're watching one big interconnected story, but also does it in a way that doesn't require the audience to see past films. The inclusion of Falcon here does that well, and even sets up Ant-Man's next appearance, which we'll get to later. Also, Yellow Jacket is probably the best of the Ant-Man villains, even if he's a generic evil CEO villain. All the other villains are just as dull, but want you to think they're more than that. While this one knows it's basic, and that's okay sometimes for a superhero film. That's all I've got to say for this one. Moving on. So, it turns out our judges don't think this movie is good. And while I disagree strongly, the numbers just don't lie. So, since I would have too much good to say about this movie, and we're kind of still in the mediocre territory, I asked the 3 judges who thought it wasn't good to voice their opinions. And, well, here's what they had to say. I'll use their characters so you know who's talking. Okay, acting time. Shit. It's alright. 3 stars.
Mid, lowest of the 3 Iron Mans. But I didn't look at PTSD from the Avengers wormhole. I just didn't like it as much as the other 2. More Happy Hogan, maybe?
Well, I guess that's our Iron Man 3 opinions. Moving on. Alright, now this Iron Man is actually not good, and should have been lower than 3 for sure. Pretty much everything about this is a worse version of the original Iron Man. Whiplash is a lame villain with a very confusing motivation that might just be his want for his bird, I don't know. The other villain, Justin Hammer, is great though, and needs to return immediately because I love him and his great value Iron Man aesthetic. Don Cheadle is finally here, and I fucking love Don Cheadle, so that's cool. I like the first suit-up scene with the briefcase, and in general, I like how Iron Man's suit-ups get more and more advanced across each movie. Back to why it's bad though. The score is lackluster and not very memorable, especially for an Iron Man film. The plot is all over the place and tries to do way too much at once, and it accomplishes all of it in a lackluster manner. I don't know if that's Favreau's fault or someone above him's fault, but it's not good. Oh yeah, there's also that Nazi Hydra soldier that cameos in this movie, making it the first Hydra member in the MCU, predating the Captain America movie. So that's gross. Anyway, not a very good movie. It is honestly pretty funny if you know it's going to be bad on a rewatch though.
No strings on me.
Lowest Avengers movie, and it's the one you probably expected. The one often forgotten because it doesn't feel very eventful compared to the others. The movie had very hype moments, don't get me wrong. Ultron as a whole had so many cool moments. Hulkbuster vs. Hulk is hype as flip, but that's all it has. As the kiddos say, it's all hype moments and aura, no real substance. The Avengers team is exactly the same as in the first one, until basically the end. Don Cheadle and Falcon have both been around at this point, and definitely should have been part of the team long before the movie's end. Especially Don Cheadle, who really should have been on the team from the first movie, but whatever. Every character just feels like they're setting up their development and arcs for the next films, and so nothing really substantial happens here to anyone, outside maybe Bruce Banner. There's none of that team development and putting aside differences from the first one, as that's already been done. So no real group arc is here either. It's just there's a threat and the Avengers need to stop it. It honestly just all feels like a lead up to Civil War, which feels more like an Avengers 2 to me than this one does in about every aspect. Scarlet Witch is a cool inclusion, and I can't believe Hawkeye killed Quicksilver like that when no one was looking. Hawkeye is also really somehow the main character of this movie, it feels like. It's very strange, but pop off, Bowman. You're doing the best you can against a damn robot army. The first Avenger himself. Wait, I think Thor's like 1,000 years old. How is Captain America the first Avenger? This subtitle doesn't even make any sense. Anyways, this is one of the stronger Phase 1 films, and it's honestly the most unique. All the other films had their concepts replicated, sometimes badly, by future films. It's one of the reasons superhero movies have gotten stale, as they often have the same plot beats and overall feel, which can work still, but you need incredibly strong characters. Writing-wise, not like actual character strength. This first Captain America film has always felt more like a war movie to me though, with a superhero thrown into it. It really works for this movie and makes it feel unique, even now. And picking World War II is good because there's clear villains in that war that everyone can agree, well, almost everyone, can agree on. The Howling Commandos are super fun. Cap's and Peggy's relationship is okay and whatever, but I don't really buy him not being able to move past her to the degree he travels time to stay with her and leave his boyfriends behind. But okay. There's not too much negatives with this one outside of it kind of getting weaker as it goes on, but not to an awful degree. It does have the Twink erasure machine though, which is a crazy invention. Doctor Strange is a weird case because it's very much your average MCU hero origin movie. It has all those same cliches and plot points that have become pretty stale and tiresome even by this point. Except it still kind of works here because this movie is not normal in like any other way. Yes, it follows all those superhero origin tropes and doesn't do much with them, but this character, his abilities, and all that stuff are just so, well, as his name literally says, weird. The unusual powers significantly add to this film and create cool visuals that help to paint over the dull colors of the plot. The abnormality of even how he defeats the villain at the end helps this to not feel as samey as it would otherwise. I mean, Doctor Strange is just a cool hero, and the wacky things his powers let him do are cool and also funny because the actors take it seriously and they're just doing bizarre hand shit
at the end of the day, I think this movie is still a fun watch, even if all I really get out of it is its peculiarness. The end of the Infinity Saga? Not really, because Far From Home counts, but that's like the end credits scene of the saga, so actually it doesn't count. This is the ultimate end that this has all been leading to. A movie meant to both celebrate this universe and put an end to this chapter of it. It does succeed in that, but it also has its problems. The end fight is nowhere near as cool as it looks. After they all charge at each other, it's this big mesh pit of fighting that I can't honestly point to a single part that's cool or interesting, like I can with Infinity Wars fights. It's not quite all hype moments, like Age of Ultron though, as there are some interesting and meaningful interactions between characters. It's more fun than anything in the end though, but it also feels impactful, so it feels purposeful. It could be the hype and the love for the MCU that blinds me to thinking this is better than it truly is, but I just can't get myself to dislike it. I mean, I just think about seeing the Cap lifting Thor's hammer scene and the Avengers Assemble line and how hype everyone in the theater was for that. It's one of the few instances I can excuse people getting somewhat loud in a theater, because these films feel more like events than anything. I guess Scorsese was right about them being theme parks, but theme parks are still fun and memorable. Also, look how realistically Don Cheadle does this choking noose tightening thing. Like you can see the strain from fighting it in his hand. It's fucking remarkable and deserves a 10-hour video analyzing how great it is.
You just need to find a woman who is pathetic. Like you.
Thanks, buddy.
I was really hoping both Guardians made it into the top 10, but this one just barely missed it. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is an incredible movie that just doesn't manage to be as impactful or great as the two Guardians it's sandwiched between. That's more of a testament to how well James Gunn makes superhero movies though, because this might be his weakest for me, and it's still an incredible movie. The Guardians make for a fun and engaging team to watch, and their banter and infighting truly make them feel like a family. Baby Groot is adorable, and Ego is honestly a stronger villain writing-wise than Ronan is. I love how his inclusion helps further the messaging of found family by showing it could be more important and meaningful than birth family. The humor is, of course, as strong as it is with any James Gunn movie, and the acting is great. This is actually one of the only roles Chris Pratt has ever clicked for me, so that's something. Also, Yondu's death is probably the closest I've ever come to actually crying and feeling big emotions from an Infinity Saga movie. Something James Gunn actually manages to make me fully do in Volume 3. Disappointing this one just barely missed the top 10, but let's see what managed to barely beat it in there. Captain America is back to fight more Nazis, but this time the Nazis are in the US government. Oh my god, that's definitely not a mirror to real life. This film also reveals our favorite MCU character, Gary Shandling, was a Nazi the whole time, which is pretty upsetting. This movie follows the first Captain America and being pretty different from the other MCU movies, as this one is a spy thriller. It's a pretty competent one too, that just throws Captain America in there as the James Bond. Falcon is a great addition to the universe, and I think Anthony Mackie plays him well, even though they keep giving him weak scripts when it's him's time to shine as the lead. The fight scenes are great and make excellent use of the characters, and Chris Evans has strong charisma as always, even as he has to fight his boyfriend this time around. I mean, at the end of the day, there's a reason why people think it's the best Captain America movie, and why it's our favorite one too. You're forgetting one, you idiot. Huh, guess we're going with this as the best Captain America movie. Well, okay. Unlike the first two, this is a pretty basic hero film, except that it is also good. It's essentially an Avengers film with Captain America as the lead. It's got new characters to the MCU, a villain who feels menacing and impactful to the saga as a whole, and actual character/team development. Or rather, in the case of the team, I suppose the opposite of development is what has happened, because the team is just gone by the end of this. I like Iron Man's turn to being full government following, It feels natural for his character at this point, and for most of the characters on his team who stay with him until the end, which is like 3, I think. I love how Captain America, after his first movie of fighting Nazis, has just been fighting the American government. Really goes to show how un-American we've become since even the symbol of the country is being outlawed here. The new characters of Spider-Man and Black Panther are great here, and the actors really feel like their characters. It honestly works really well to have them here first to hype up and lead into their own solo films later on. I wish the consequences of this film had its impacts better shown in the future films, and I think having something like the Black Widow movie come out before Infinity War would help with that complaint. That's not the fault of this movie, but I wanted to mention it. The Captain America movies stayed pretty strong throughout the Chris Evans trilogy, all things considered, and 2 even made it in the top 10. Let's see what else made it.
When it comes to a Spider-Man story, I really appreciate how they've been taking this universe of Spider-Man to a different direction than like what we normally see with Spider-Man. I think they showed the repercussions of him losing Mr. Stark as his mentor. They showed it really well because like he's going through a bunch of different emotions. He's got so much going on in his mind, and it really reflects on the choices he ends up making and his actions in general. Like it really shows that like he's going through a lot. Them leaving the New York landscape is by far one of my favorite things that they've done with the Tom Holland Spider-Man trilogy currently. Is I really appreciate that they showed that, you know, he's not just only in New York, that things happen outside of just this area, and he has to figure out ways to fix those problems that are occurring because Spider-Man doesn't shut down just because he's on vacation. Like he's still Spider-Man whether he's in Rome, whether he's in Japan, or he's in New York at home. He's still Spider-Man at the end of the day, and he holds himself to that. I like that they did that, honestly. I thought it was very refreshing. I mean, the Peter MJ love plot it's always there. I do like the fact that it's a much more innocent kind of love going on rather than like, say, Tobey Maguire's, where they're older. And so there's a lot of scandalous things happening in their relationship. There's a lot of issues and drama, a lot of turmoil. Whereas like with the Tom Holland ones, it's a much more innocent type of relationship. One of my favorite things is how interactive it is with all the side characters. Like, it shows him having a life outside of Spider-Man. I really like all the different characters that they've been adding in and giving them special roles and stuff. I think Ned is a great friend to have, like a great little side character friend to have. There's Happy and his subplot going on with Peter's aunt. And then you'll get like the bits with like Nick Fury where he's like, hey kid, we need Spider-Man. So you see him interacting as Spider-Man with other people as well. And I think it's good. I really loved Mysterio. I thought he was an immaculate villain to have in the setting that they had him in. They really showed the full extent of what he could do because Mysterio, he's not like just some dumb guy. I liked all the gadgets and stuff he had to go with his whole shtick. He's a damn good villain. It kind of showed how quick people are to believe what they consider the biggest news, and by like what's the biggest and shiniest and something that seems the juiciest type of news, and what it's really easy to manipulate the media to change like society's opinions on somebody. I think they did a really good job portraying that. Oh, I love the action scenes in the movie. They were good. They were great. The special effects and the CGI were immaculate. They were really good, especially like the big fight towards the end. Oh my god, it was immaculate. There was a good balance of like drama to action to comedic relief moments. I feel like the bits of comedy they added in really helped kind of round out what was going on, and it made it feel not so heavy. I don't particularly remember not liking anything about the movie, to be honest. I love these movies. They're great movies.
The introduction of Spider-Man into the MCU, and it's a good start. I think Tom Holland is great casting for Spider-Man, which we see in Civil War and see even more so here in Homecoming. The way Vulture is translated in this film is really well done, and I like the reveal of him being Peter's love interest father. I think the use of Iron Man or Tony Stark is great, and it uses him enough to impact the plot without making the story focused on him. I also like how you get to see the lives of some of the normal people in the MCU, and it really helps highlight the street levelness of Spider-Man, unlike the next two of his films, which are still good. It could be better in that regard, and perhaps the fourth Tom Holland film will do it better, but this one still feels great. All the quips do feel very much like Spider-Man as well, even if they don't always land in terms of their comedy. The quips are perhaps a bit overwhelming at times, but I think for the most part it's good. It would be nice if we got some more of Donald Glover in future projects outside of his cameo in Across the Spider-Verse, but he's a nice cameo here regardless. At the end of the day, it's a super fun film that uses the superhero genre very well and holds up to some of the best Spider-Man films we got from the Sam Raimi ones. So, we actually have a tie for these next two films. I did my usual 2 different tiebreaker methods, and they tied every single one of those. I guess that's the cost of having an even number of judges now. Oh well, I'm going to consider these as both being in 5th place. So this top 5 is technically a top 6. Whichever one you like the most is 6th, if you're going to complain about that. Here's the top 5 movies of the Infinity Saga. It is a bit crazy that it took 18 films to get a black-led superhero movie in the MCU, but thankfully their first shot at one is also one of the best films in the saga. From its excellent casting all around to its impactful messaging, the film feels very remarkable and pretty unique too. The infight does have some weak CGI usage, but that's my biggest complaint with the film, and even that isn't an end-of-the-world negative for me, but it is sadly pretty noticeable. I think Michael B. Jordan is the highlight of this film, though. Not only is his performance a standout one, but his character has the best writing of the movie, and is probably the best antagonist in the MCU as a whole. And I'm not just saying that because he's hot. I'm very happy it managed to make it into the top 5 because it is very deserving of it, and I genuinely believe it helped to boost needed representation and led to ending many individual stereotypes of Africa. So its impact there, on top of just being a great movie, makes it deserving of being this high up.
They call themselves the Guardians of the Galaxy.
And for the other number 5 is my personal favorite movie of the Infinity Saga. I, like pretty much everyone else, did not know these characters before this movie was released, but after seeing it, I immediately fell in love with them and their team dynamic. Even as a kid, I absolutely adored this movie and loved it so much that I made my grandma take me to watch it in theaters for a second time. The dysfunctional family that loves each other so much, slowly being created in this movie, is just so good and enjoyable to watch unfold. Every character's little traumas and weaknesses being on full display as they begin to learn they're not all that different from each other is so beautiful. Groot is like an incredibly cool character, and his sacrifice at the end is so magical and sad at the same time. Let's not forget the stellar use of music here either. Throughout all 3 Guardians, I think this one still has my favorite usage of songs to make the scenes they play in somehow so much more impactful. At the end of the day, I hope everyone has a family, whether biological or not, that loves them and protects them the way the Guardians love and protect each other.
Thor Ragnarok, the third Thor film, is one of my favorites for many reasons. One, because it uses comedy so well. I feel like not many of the other films in the MCU leaned more into comedy until this one, and I think the jokes and humors land really well. I think this film takes Thor as a character to a whole nother level and focuses on the qualities that make him more human. His heartbreak, loss, are so beautifully portrayed and add a new depth to this already loved character. Another thing that Thor and Ragnarok bring to the table is brotherly bond. This is the first film where we really see Loki and Thor start to get along more, and I think they even begin to start to understand one another. Another reason I like this film is how it touches on a home is not a place, but a people. Thor watches his world be taken and eventually fall, but he quickly learns that that's not what makes it a home, but instead it's all the love that the people of Asgard share with each other.
The one that started it all, and it's pretty neat. It seems it holds up enough to even make it to the top 3. It's a bit of a weird case because at the time I'd argue it was pretty unique, but since the majority of the MCU sadly are just copies of this film, You'd think it would dwindle the filling of this one. It doesn't though, and I think that's because it uses these, what are now tropes, very well. Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark is really good casting, and he really manages to bring this snarky, over-eccentric billionaire to life. The movie as a whole, I think, is paced well enough not to fall too much into that repetitive origin story trap many hero origin stories fall into. I appreciate that, at the end of the day, the villain is a white American who is profiting off a foreign war by selling weapons instead of it just being some foreign guy. It definitely does it in a corporate, very safe Hollywood way, as you can see by it not directly calling out the US government and military as well, but it's undeniably there in my opinion, and is something many modern hero films feel too scared to do. A billionaire like Tony Stark would sadly never be against these money-making schemes and would likely join in when finding out about it, but movies aren't meant to be realistic and can show us what a better side of life can be. Marvel as a whole really does that well at times, either by letting you escape to a better place for a few hours, or by showing you where change in our world needs to be. The start of this cinematic universe was truly great, and though it may have dwindled since then, its rock-solid foundation hasn't seemed to wither. The first Avengers film felt truly magical to me as a kid. Taking all these heroes and putting them all together to fight one big threat is just so astonishing and exciting. Of course, kids will like anything, and that's why Minions movies make so much money. But Kid Me was right about this one. The building of the Avengers and combining all these characters who have been established through their own movies is just done perfectly here. Every character's interaction with each other feels exactly how you would imagine it in your head, because both the script and the actors' portrayals perfectly encapsulates these characters. Hell, even the side characters like Agent Coulson managed to leave a pretty big impact on the audience and the film as a whole. I think bringing Loki back to be the villain again is an incredibly bold choice that pays off. We've seen this villain defeated by just one member of the Avengers before, so the film needed to make him a threat to a whole team of the strongest defenders of Earth, and Hawkeye and Black Widow, I guess, too. It of course succeeds in that by fully playing into his mischief side and being able to sort of tear the team apart. Having a whole space army at the end also helps with making him feel menacing and unbeatable, of course. I think the comedy here is some of the strongest in the MCU as well. Oh, I do want to mention that I laugh at these two not really humorous lines now because of the Lego Avengers game. The party tricks line.
Sorry, kids, you don't get to see my party trick after all.
And the fish in a barrel line
They're fishing a barrel down there.
have been ruined for me by these scenes in Lego Avengers. This has no relevance to my rating of the film or its placement, but I wanted an excuse to play these clips. I'm sure you all probably saw this coming. As I stated before, the first Avengers managed to feel very magical. Well, Avengers Infinity War managed to feel even more magical. It manages to take the entire saga as a whole, with its many films and many cast of characters, and use them to craft an incredible experience that feels more than just mashing together random action figures. All these characters, just like in the first Avengers, truly feel the same as they were written in their original appearances. Except, unlike the first Avengers, this manages to do it on a much larger scale because of just how many characters have been introduced since then. Even the past characters have been through so much development and change that this film doesn't wash over or ignore. Getting to see the Guardians of the Galaxy interact with Spider-Man, and a lot of our favorite characters going to Wakanda to fight a bunch of aliens just feels like the perfect ending to an incredible journey. There are just so many other decisions and character interactions that make this movie feel so hype, even after you've seen it a billion times. Seeing it in theaters was such a magical experience too, that I would love to get to experience again. Thanos is such a good threat to the Avengers, both with and without the Black Order backing him. The threat of the Infinity Stones and how those have been set up throughout the entire saga truly make this feel like a season finale for a very long and rich in lore TV series. The fight scenes, especially the ones involving Doctor Strange, Iron Man, the Guardians, and Spider-Man, often return to my mind randomly as I remember just how cool they are and how they managed to use each of those characters, no matter how weak they are, at their best. And oh god, the ending was something else. Watching all these characters we loved be erased from the world and their friends and family forced to watch, and us forced to watch, is so heartbreaking. It's obvious they would come back in Endgame, but in that moment you don't think about that. In that moment you just feel despair as you watch all your favorite heroes lose. They made Thanos such a good threat against these countless heroes, and I wasn't sure they would be able to pull it off, but they did. While Infinity War is not my personal favorite Infinity Saga film, I do not think it's undeserving of placing first here. Avengers Infinity War is the Moo Moo Awards official Best MCU Infinity Saga film. And that's the end of our first ever Moo Moo Awards Mini. I'm thinking of having a Moo Moo Awards each season, with the big yearly one still happening as the winter one. If you have any specific franchises to rank in mind, let me know. Hell, it doesn't even have to be franchises, just whatever you can come up with as a category, like maybe specific actors' filmography, directors' films, or even strange categories. Let me know in the comments below and I might just steal them. I hope this ranking was to your liking, and if not, tell me what shocked you or you felt was too high/low. I'm also going to include some random stats here at the end for those interested. Thanks for watching.